I'm also a Virginia Tech student earning my Master's of Science in Nutrition. Today you're going to be joining me in my home kitchen to make a delicious winter soup that really celebrates all of the great produce we get at the farmer's market this time of the year. This roasted squash chowder uses winter squash, of course, along with some potatoes, onions, celery, corn, and any other vegetables that you feel inspired to add. If you're anything like me, it can sometimes be difficult to shop at the farmer's market in winter when there's a little less variety than you would normally get in the summer, so I'll also share some tips and tricks along the way for meal planning at the farmer's market. First up, we're going to go ahead and get the squash roasted and in the oven so we can prep our other ingredients while that's going. So getting started with our squash, any kind of winter squash worked great. I'm really doing a medley today, so I have butternut, kabocha, and acorn squash. The really good thing about this recipe is that it's a soup. So if you have some imperfect squash, you can kind of see this one's a little imperfect, and so is this one. They're still perfectly good to use. They're going in a soup. So we're gonna go ahead. I think it's really important to have a really sharp knife. It's actually a little bit safer to have a sharp knife because then you're not struggling to get it through. You're gonna go ahead and from top to bottom, cut your squash in half. May take a little bit of work, but it's gonna be worth it in the end. All right, so now that we've got this in half, you're gonna see all these beautiful seeds in there. Just go ahead, take a spoon and carve them out. There are plenty of recipes that you can do to roast these seeds, but that's not gonna be part of our recipe today. So just go ahead, get all of that out, and you're left with this. What we're gonna do with this is just go ahead and place it on a baking tray, and we've got an oven preheating to 350 degrees. So go ahead and prep all your squash like this. All right, so I've got my squash all scooped out. Isn't this the prettiest squash you've ever seen? And I've got them laid out on my baking sheet. My oven just dinged at me to let me know that it's at 350, so I'm gonna go ahead and pop them in. They'll be in there for about an hour, and whenever I have to put stuff in the oven for an hour, I love taking that time to go ahead and prep the rest of my vegetables and kind of make the most of that time. I almost forgot to mention that we're also gonna get some corn roasting. It can roast in the same oven. Keep it on 350. Just make sure you're paying attention to the corn because it has a lot of sugars in it and it might burn. I know that corn isn't in season right now. It's a great way though to use some frozen veggies that maybe were picked during the season and you're just kind of supplementing the rest of the veggies in this video with it. The sweetness that we're gonna get from this corn is gonna be perfect in the soup. You're also gonna hopefully get a little bit of smokiness just from having it in the oven roasting as well. So we're gonna go ahead and open this bag and get it on this pan. You really don't need to have it in one layer or anything. The aim is to get it thawed and get some of these edges a little brown. And if you've noticed that I haven't said any of the measurements in this video so far, I don't want to bog you guys down with all those numbers yet, so they'll be in the recipe in the description. Alright, so I am done with my chopping. I have some diced onion, some diced potato, some diced celery, and I went ahead and juiced my lemon. So the really good thing about this recipe is it's all going to get pureed up in the end, so if your cuts aren't uniform, that's perfectly okay. I know I have some big pieces of celery and some little pieces of celery, but again, it all gets blended up, so you're really not going to be able to tell. I also wanted to give a quick food waste tip. Most potatoes, there are a couple kinds, like maybe russets where the skin is really thick, but if you have a thin skin on your potatoes, there's no reason why you need to peel that off unless it's something that you like from a texture or flavor standpoint. I like to keep my skins on because it saves a lot of time instead of having to peel all those potatoes by hand, and it also helps prevent a little bit of food waste because you're not losing any of that flesh as you peel. One other thing that I did want to mention, I didn't have as many potatoes as I thought I did. Ideally I would have a little bit more. I don't think I'm even meeting what the recipe calls for with my potatoes, but that is perfectly okay. The beauty about cooking, especially when you're making a soup, is you can really just customize it to whatever you like. If you don't have enough potatoes, that's okay. Maybe you don't like onions, you can substitute that out. Do you have some carrots that you want to use up? throw those in. I think that would be delicious. So cooking, especially when you're cooking soups, modify it to what's available to you at the farmer's market, what you like. If you don't like onions, leave them out. Or what you have and don't have. For example, I didn't have enough potatoes. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't forgetting about our squash in the oven. So you're gonna know when they're tender when you can put a fork in it and it goes in easily. So if you can see here, it's not going in easily. We'll check this one. Oh, that went in fairly easily. I think I'll give our acorn squash a couple more minutes, and let's check our kaboka. The kaboka is still pretty hard. So if you're using different squashes like I am, there may be some different cooking times, and that's okay. You can pull them out as they're done. So I think I'll give these a couple more minutes. These definitely still have a little bit of time left. Same thing with the corn, quick check-in on that. As you can see, mine is pretty much thawed now, but I'm still looking for a little bit of browning on the edges that I just don't have yet. I'll probably give these a couple more minutes. I'm guessing this might be ready at the same time I'm ready to pull that acorn squash out. So probably gonna put it back in, set a timer for about 5 minutes, and recess at that point. So I felt comfortable to go ahead and pull out my corn. I got a little bit of browning on the edges, as you can see. This is just gonna sit until the rest of our ingredients are ready to go. All right, my acorn squash is definitely done, nice and tender. I'm still not done on these. It's going in, but it's taking a little bit of effort. Same with the kaboka. So I'm gonna take these off, let them start to cool, and I'm gonna put these back in probably another 5 minutes or so, and then we'll be good to move on to the next step of the recipe. All right, all of our squash is done. And since we pulled these acorn squashes out a little bit earlier than the rest of this, the acorn squashes are actually cool enough to be handled, which means that they are ready for the next step. So the next step is taking a spoon. You can use the same one that you used to take out the seeds earlier. And you're just gonna go around and dig your spoon in and get that pulp out as much as you can. And you can just put that into a separate bowl, and we'll come back to that later. All right, our next step is to get a big pot, put it on the stove over medium heat, and we're gonna add in our diced celery that we've already chopped up, and our diced onion that we've already chopped up. You're welcome to put a little bit of olive oil or any neutral oil that you like in this pan first, but really the vegetables have so much water, it's really not necessary, so do whatever you like and what you think would make this soup best for you. And we're gonna go ahead, while it's cooking, we're gonna give it about 5 minutes, and while it's going, we're gonna make sure that we're stirring it now and then just to make sure everything gets evenly cooked. All right, it's been 5 minutes. You can already start to see a little bit of steam coming off because, like I said, those vegetables have a lot of water. I'm gonna go ahead, I have my salt, pepper, and thyme here in a bowl. I'm gonna go ahead and add that in, and we're gonna give it another 2 minutes. All right, so our 2 minutes are up, and we're gonna go ahead and add our broth. A little tip here, if you're watching your sodium, it's really easy to find a reduced salt version, or you can make your own and omit the salt. So we're gonna go ahead and pour this in. And once we get this poured in, we're gonna bring it up to a boil and reduce it down to a simmer, and then we'll be back with our next step. All right, so I got my soup up to a boil, reduced it down to a simmer, which means we can go ahead and add in our squash. A really fun fact about squash is that it's really high in vitamin A, vitamin C, and it's a really good source of fiber. It's interesting that it's high in vitamin A because look at that color. What does that remind you of? A little bit like carrots, right? Carrots are also high in vitamin A. Those proteins just give it a little bit of an orange color, so that's a little bit of a fun fact. And once this is in, we're just gonna wait until everything's real nice and tender, and we'll go to our next step. All right, so all my vegetables are super tender now, as you can see. The amount of time it's going to take for you to get to this point really depends on how soft your squash are going in. I think mine needed maybe a little bit more time. I think I was a little impatient on roasting them in the oven, but it's all good now. Our next step is going to be pureeing this. You can use an immersion blender, like a stick blender, directly in the pot if you have one of those. If you don't, you can use a stand blender, which is what I'm going to be doing. That's just your traditional blender. If you are using a stand blender, it's really important that you let this cool down first. If you put a hot liquid in a blender, it can build up pressure and explode in your face and burn you really badly. So it's important that you wait until it's cooled off. I have mine off the heat. I'm just gonna let it cool probably until it stops steaming. I might give it a little finger touch and see if it's good to go. All right, my soup has cooled to about room temperature now, so I'm gonna go ahead and start the blending process. With blending, you can make it as smooth as you want or as chunky as you want. It's really up to your preference. I like mine a little bit smoother, so I think I'll probably blend for a little bit longer, but again, it's completely up to you. The soup is pureed. I've got it back in the pot and bringing it back up to temperature. It is so creamy and smooth now. We're gonna go ahead and add in that roasted corn that we did earlier in the oven, our diced potatoes, our lemon juice, and then if you want, you can do a little bit of cayenne pepper. It gives it a little bit of a spicy kick that helps balance some of the sweetness that's going on. If you don't like spicy food, you are more than welcome to omit this or add in whatever seasonings you like at this point. All right, I've got all of that stuff in. At this point, it's really just waiting for these potatoes to boil and get nice and soft and tender. That's gonna be about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how big you made your potato pieces. Mine are a little bit on the smaller side. I'm guessing it'll take about 11 minutes, and I'll check back in at that point. My potatoes are cooked, so it's time for our final taste test. I love this soup. It's so hearty, a little bit creamy just from blending everything up, and you get some sweetness coming through from the squash and from the corn. I think I like my seasonings the way they are right now, but when you do your final taste test, if you want to adjust anything, you're more than welcome to do so. Add a little bit more thyme, add some pepper, salt, or add a completely different seasoning. It is totally your prerogative. At this point, you are welcome to eat it, share it, or if you don't think you're going to be able to eat it all, you can freeze it in individual portions. It freezes really well. You can just take those out when you're ready to eat it, thaw it, and then heat it up either in the microwave or on the stove, whatever works for you. I hope that you make this recipe, and I hope that you really enjoy it as much as I do. Thank you.